Welcome to Dirshu Daf HaYomi Bahalacha. Today we are learning Hilchos Netilas Yadayim, Shachris, the laws of washing one's hands in the morning, which is Siman Dalid. We are going to begin today with Sif Beis. We're going to continue until and including Sif Zayin. The three questions which we're going to be focused on today is how many times must one wash each hand upon arising in the morning? How should the hands be positioned for washing? And must one wash the hands of a baby? So let's begin with Sif Beis. Yadaktek, person should be careful. It says that a person should wash his hands 3 times. We'll have a ruach ra sheshar leim, in order to be able to remove the ruach ra, this ruach ra which is on the hands, which we saw according to the sheet of the Rashba. So the Mishnah Berurah says, "Ki chutz mehatamim niskarim b'seif katan aleph." That before we already talked about this in Sif katan aleph. Shesarach lital yadav l'tefila. They have to wash your hands to daven. Sarach lital gam mishum ruach ra hashor al yadayim. In addition to the inyan of washing your hands, because you have to make sure before you daven, in general, so too you always have to wash in the morning, because there's an issue of ruach ra. However, if the whole issue is dafka with ruach ra, then you wouldn't say bracha. That's the reason why we had to say the other reasons in addition to that. So a person is supposed to wash them 3 times. So it says you're supposed to make sure that you wash your hands up until the wrist. Once you don't have water, so die ad kishri etz boisav, at least until the knuckles of the fingers. Preferably we should wash all the way to the wrist, but at least the kishri etz boisav. You have to open up and stretch out your palms, like you want to accept something. And you lift them up opposite your head. And some also will wash their mouth as well. However, of course, we don't do this when it comes to a public fast, because we don't put water into our mouth. But otherwise, you should maybe clean your mouth. But clearly here it tells us that there's an inyan that we should be careful when we wash, that we should also, some even tilt the hands while the water is being poured, so that this way for sure the water is on all the hands. Otherwise, if you pour, sometimes you see that they're only pouring it at this angle and you're not getting the entirety of the wrist. So it's good to turn the hand also so the water completely goes on it. Continue the Mishnah Berurah. So you say, well, what if I pour a lot of water onto one time? That doesn't help. That's not enough. You have to do it 3 times. For the ruach ra to leave, it has to be done 3 times. He explains. It has to be first on the right hand. So we don't just pour 1, 1, 1 like we do for a Suda. Rather, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. Ad sholosh pa'amim b'sirugin. Again, it has to be done b'sirugin, one after the other. It was Sefer Ma'aser Rav Kasa, but it's mentioned in the Sefer Rav that arba pa'amim, that actually you're supposed to do it 4 times each. Why? So sholosh pa'amim lahaber ruach ra. 3 times to remove the ruach ra. Revius, the 4th time lahaber hamayim shenitmu. You still have water on your hand which is impure, so you want to get the impure waters. Sarach l'zahar l'nashim. Women should be careful. She is harub and the tilas yadayim shlosh pa'amim serugim kamo hanashim. Women are just as mechuyev to do this mitzvah as men. V'gam kihim mesaknos hamacholim shlo yitamum b'yadeihem. Also when they're touching foods. Gam yesh lizar l'katanim. Also when it comes to kids, yitul yadeihem b'shachos. We'll see what it means. Kids, ki noigim b'meichel. They touch food, and again it becomes problematic. Touching the food. If Interesting, when it comes to an akum, so do they have to do Netilas Yadayim because they may touch food? No, they're not Makabel Tuma like Yisrael, and therefore, because of that, it's not an issue. So let's look at the Bi'urim Umusafim number 22. So is it 3 times or 4? So the Shulchan Aruch tells us it's 3, but the Masarav tells us 4 times. And then he says like this: in Sirugim and the Til Revius. So the question is, we do right, left, right, left, right, left. Can we do now the left and then the right? Does it matter? So according to Rav Kanievsky, he says, "Shaminig ha'olam hu litol gam netilas zulus v'sirugin amandinim establishing sarch." The reality is, it's better to do it in the same right, left, also for the 4th time, even though Maker Din may not be necessary. So let's see what Dirshu writes. As we have discussed, a person must wash Netilas Yadayim in the morning. We quoted the reasons for this halacha as discussed in the Rishonim, as we said before, the Rosh and the Rashba. It follows that from either of these reasons that washing once on each hand would be sufficient. However, a third reason to wash upon arising in the morning is Ruach Ra, a negative force which rests on a person's hands when he wakes up in the morning. So actually, it's not the Rosh and the Rashba. This is a third reason completely. Therefore, for this third reason, that's why we have to wash 3 times. This force can only be removed by washing 3 times on each hand, alternating between the hands. According to the Vilna Gaon, each hand must be washed a 4th time in order to remove the tummy water from the hands. The 4th washing does not need to be done in an alternate fashion. After the 3rd pouring on one side, the 4th can be poured on the same side. So you can go, again, left, technically, again. Nonetheless, some have the custom to pour the 4th time alternately as well. Okay, let's continue now with the next discussion regarding children. Must one wash the hands of a baby? So it's brought down, as we saw in the Mishnah Berurah, that a person should be zahir for kids to wash in the morning because they touch food. So he says like this: how about you have a child who's not even reached the age of chinuch? So is that an issue? They have to wash hands? So it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch Harav, Shenaglo Hakuba, that he's lenient, but Hoisif, Shemi Shehazor B'Negiya B'Negiya Shel Katan Kfar Miyom Mila Kodesh Yarmilo. That if actually you start washing your kids' hands from the day of bris milah, from babies 8 years old, that's considered a kaddish. The Rivitz writes that she'av shenagul hakel b'negiyas katan kozman shagil chinuch. Even though it's true, we could be lenient if the child has reached the age of chinuch. Mikomakim yishal hachmir ba ifum yom milah. As we said, there are those people who are strict. And he quotes Rabbi Yashav that sheishal hakbid litol yodav shel katan mizman shemaskil alechas. By the time the child is able to go. And in the Kuntras in Mitzvah Chinuch, he says, Shroy little katan es yodav mahagil from the age shabo hu mavin mash hadvarim imoy. So he basically understands what he's saying, he's able to speak, he understands things. So already at a younger age, which is really before the age of Chinuch, perhaps one should already have their children's hands washed. Okay, let's see how this is written. Must one wash the hands of a baby? So prior to washing, a person should not touch his mouth, nose, ears, or eyes, which is brought down in Gemara Shabbos. You cut say it's literally it'll be cut off, is the lashon of the Gemara. Ruach Ra can cause damage to these body parts. Some understand that these areas are significant because they are openings into the body. It is also forbidden to touch any food or drink. The poskim disagree about whether it is necessary to wash the hands of a child who is below the age of chinuch. Many poskim are stringent and recommend washing from a young age. They offer various milestones to signal when washing should begin. These include, depending on the opinion, when a child begins to walk, as we said, when he understands what is spoken to him, and when he begins touching food, his mouth or his eyes. Some are careful from bris milah and onward. B'diavad, if a person, even an adult, touch food or drink before washing, the food does not become forbidden. The food should be washed 3 times before it is eaten. If beer was touched when with unwashed hands, many poskim maintain that it should not be consumed. So, and I didn't read this, but this is what's brought down in the Bir Halacha and the like. Okay, so let's continue now with the next sif. So let's continue. We're going to see straight through Gimel through Zion now. Lo yiga biyado, person should not touch kaidim netil l'peh v'loyachaitem, not your mouth, not your nose, v'loznaim v'loynaim. Don't touch any of your openings of your body, as we mentioned before, because as we said, because there's a ruach hara on them, and it says v'yishul zar yafil al gabi einav mimachutz imach shalo. Even let's say like you're outside of your eyes, the person should be careful with all those things. Okay. Sif Dalad. Afilu misha noto yodov. Even if someone who washed their hands, li mashmish befi hatabas tamid. The person should not be touching this area of their body. Mipnei shemaviyosu de tachtainiyos, because it could be dangerous for the digestive tract. Lo yiga b'makam ha kaza. A person should also be careful when it comes to the place of bloodletting. Because if you keep touching it, you're going to cause the bruise to get even worse. Okay, and now this is actually Sif Hey, which we already quoted. Well, yiga begigis shecher, you're not supposed to touch beer. Shima sheyad maset hashecher, because if you touch it, you're going to cause it to be lost. So if you look over here in Sif Hey, in the Mishnah Berurah, Masad HaShecher, V'im naga b'maychel kaidim shelto yadav. If you touch food before you wash your hands, ein le'eser b'maychel al yedei zeh. So as we saw already, that the food is still allowed. You shouldn't touch any food. V'im naga b'maychel, if you did, so yadichenu shlosh pamim. As we said before, you're supposed to wash it 3 times. V'chein ein lishtos ashen tabak. A person should also, what it means, not to drink tobacco smoke before Netilas Yadayim. So what does that say? So the Biur Musaf says, Makor Devarav hu Bi'artzos HaChaim Shekosim Shetama Iser hu Mishum Shenaiga Ba'apo, because it's touching your nose. Yigam Mishum Shematama Hatabik Hanisher Bekuftza. So I think it has to do again, like maybe sniffing it. Okay. Sivav ein sarach revius l'netilas yadayim l'tefila. So he says the measurement, you do not need even a revius for netilas yadayim for davening. Ratzaloim, says the Mishnah Berurah, the Evid ein ma'akiv habracha mavarech al netilas yadayim. L'v'chatchila, preferably toiv l'hakbid shehi lo'igam kin revius. You should have at least a revius water when it comes to this. Okay. And finally, Sif Zayin. Toiv l'hakbid netilas yadayim, shachris b'chol hadavarim hama'akvim netilas yadayim l'suda. Preferably, one should be careful in all the dinim of netilas yadayim in the morning, just like when it comes to the meal. Even though we said certain water, which is invalid for the netilas yadayim for the suda, is valid when it comes to netilas yadayim shachris. And we said there's a machlokas, do you say al nekiyas yadayim, al netilas yadayim? And then we conclude with Ramah. Mihu inam akiv lo kliv lo koich gavra ushar devar mapaisim sulas benetilas suda. Interesting. The Ramah says that even though you really should have the same dinim, but if let's say you don't have a kli, it wasn't koich gavra, which basically means it was like turning on a faucet. The question again is turning the faucet on and off. Is that considered an element of koich gavra? Let's say the water is just pouring out. Again, we said we're more lenient when it comes to netilas yadayim of shachris than of the suda. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Einam Akiv, Ratzel Loimer di Eved le'inyan bracha, v'yochel varach al netilas yadayim, v'afil chachil heichadi efsher be'inyan acher. Heichadi efsher tov l'hakbid. Obviously, if you can be strict, better to be strict. Lo kli, Ratzel Loimer demahani af lahaver ruach ra. That it can still remove the ruach ra. If you don't have a complete vessel, you can use a kli which has a hole in it. Which again is something like a pump or like a faucet. So even though there's no koyach gavra, so he says that would be acceptable. Okay. All right. So let's look at the biurim umusafim. It says even though technically we're more lenient when it comes to the Netilas Yadayim in the morning, nonetheless you should be makbid if possible. So he says, how about by chatzitza? So he says, is it shaykh that we are concerned of the din of Netilas Yadayim also in the morning of chatzitza. So again, this is how our hands should be positioned for washing. That we should be concerned and not have a chatzitza even by this netila. So it's written down that Netilas Yadayim in the morning will shaykh kol kach chatzitza come Netilas Yadayim l'sud. Again, some people are more lenient, and the Shulchan Aruch Harav says sheishul zahar mechatzitza Netilas Yadayim shachar. So Gavi Hamagadol Siparnov, when it comes to growing your nails, shemekach mishum chatzitza Netilas Yadayim shel shachars. So that's not considered to be a chatzitza, which even though sometimes if your nails are too long, that could be an element of a chatzitza, we don't have that concern here. Okay, so let's conclude with this last question, again, of how should the hands be positioned for washing. The water should be poured over the entire hand up to the wrist, which we saw before in the Mishnah Berurah. According to the teachings of Kabbalah, one should pour over his open hand as if he was trying to receive the water, like his palms. L'chadchila, all the criteria that apply to washing for bread apply to washing in the morning. Some say that one must be careful to remove any chatzitzas, obstructions between the hand and the water. Halachic stringencies that are kept in the case of Netilas Yadayim before a meal need not be adhered to when washing in the morning. Okay, so let's see if there's any questions that was asked 7 years ago regarding this. It says as follows. Is water which is invalid for washing to eat bread valid for washing in the morning? So the answer is yes. And one says a bracha. It is better to use water that is valid for washing to eat bread. Some say that one says al nikiyas yadayim. The later poskim have ruled that one says the usual bracha. We saw that before. Is dipping one's hands into a basin of water or putting them under running tap water adequate for davening? So dipping in the water is adequate. Putting it under running tap water is not. Which hand does one wash first in the morning? One's right hand. Must one wash one's hands 3 times after sleeping more than 60 breaths by day? So we'll see that another time there is a doubt. One should wash but not say a bracha. Ad kan.